Good afternoon. Calling the Ways and Means Committee to order for January 26, 2026. Today on our agenda we have a work session about aircraft fuel taxes, and then we will move from there into public hearing. We have 8 bills listed for public hearing. So we'll start with the work session. If we can have the folks presenting come up. Just Anne, right, Richard? How do you say it?
Richard, thank you.
Richard and Steve Ewing. And just begin whenever you're ready.
All right, I'll jump right in then. So I wanted to start by just introducing the aviation division of WSDOT a little bit, because we are a very small division, including myself. We have a total of 12 people. So a lot of people aren't familiar with exactly what we do. So I just wanted to give you that background. We foster the development of aeronautics and the state's aviation system to support sustainable communities and statewide economic vitality. So what that means is we provide roughly $3.5 million a year in grants and loans to Washington airports. We maintain and manage 16 emergency access airports. So those are the ones that you're likely to think of as like a dirt strip. These are the ones that provide important emergency access, or in some cases recreational access, but there's nobody else there to look after them. We also do planning of the state's aviation system. So while the airports do individual planning in conjunction with the FAA, we are the entity that does the system-wide planning and kind of determines and helps the FAA understand what the Washington system of airports is and what it means and how it works. As part of that, we inspect general aviation airports for safety on behalf of the FAA, so that's a function that FAA does on the commercial service airports. We also provide expertise to WSDOT and to other agencies and to the public on drones, so that's a new emerging field for us. We provide technical assistance to Washington airports and to communities that might have concerns or interest in airports. And then we register aircraft drones and aircraft dealers. So that's who we are. Today you're going to be discussing the FAA's aviation fuel tax regulation. So I wanted to give you a little history, and I just have to tell you this is a brief history because there's actually a lot that has been going on for many years on this. So it actually started in 2014, which was when FAA adopted a rule, a policy about the appropriate use of fuel tax, aircraft fuel tax related revenue. But that policy looked back to 1987. So the triggering date was any fuel taxes that existed prior to this date, December 30th, 1987, were grandfathered. So this policy doesn't apply to aircraft fuel taxes prior to 1987. It does apply to any fuel taxes that were implemented from December 30th, 1987 forward.
If I could just interrupt you.
Sure.
So are these fuel taxes that the state has imposed, levied?
Thank you for the clarification. Yes, these are state fuel taxes.
Okay. And they're paid by someone buying fuel for their aircraft. Is that correct?
Sometimes it's they're paid by the distributor that sells the fuel to the person fueling their aircraft. So it's whoever it is that's paying the tax at whatever level.
Okay. Senator Conway.
A manufacturer is not involved in this fuel tax, only owners of airplanes. This has no impact on Boeing, I guess, was the question I'm asking.
Not on Boeing, no.
All right. I mean, they do fly airplanes, so they buy fuel.
Correct, from that perspective, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so it was actually in December 8th of 2017 that every state was required to be compliant with this rule of reinvesting all aviation fuel taxes in aviation. So in June 28th of 2017, that's when the state was being proactive before the deadline, submitted an action plan to the FAA describing how we would comply with the rule, but FAA didn't approve that action plan. So after that, this august body, the Senate, passed Senate Bill 6168, which required the Department of Revenue to develop an action plan, hopefully that would be compliant, and submit that to the Senate. Department of Revenue did work with Department of Licensing and Department of Transportation on developing that action plan, and that was approved by the FAA in 2022. So then in 2024, we got a letter from the FAA that said, okay, you have an approved action plan. We want to audit that, audit what you've been doing to make sure that Washington State is doing what you said you were going to do in the action plan. So we got that letter in April of 24. In July of 24, we sent a response, which included a list of projects that were not funded from the state aeronautics account, but were funded from a variety of different accounts, but were reinvested in statewide aviation-related projects. So it took a little while, a little bit over a year. You can see we submitted that response in July of 24. In October of 25, so this is just a few months ago now, we got a letter from the FAA that said, okay, some of those projects that you've listed, some of them are good. Some of them absolutely don't count, they're not good, and some of them, we don't know if they're good or not. We need some more information. And so that's where we are right now. What we have done is requested an extension of an additional 60 days from FAA. So that was granted. So we now have until February 18th. So a couple more weeks yet to put together a response to FAA's letter. So that's where we are now. How about that one? Okay, so we've been talking about compliance, so this is kind of very down and dirty simple what FAA requires in order to comply with their regulation. First, and every time I say we, I mean the state of Washington. So the state of Washington has to document the actual aviation fuel tax revenue that's been collected. So first we know how much money we're talking about. The requirement in the FAA regulation is that those funds must be deposited into an account that's dedicated solely to airport capital improvements, aviation noise mitigation programs, statewide aviation programs as defined and identified by the FAA. Previously, when our action plan was approved, FAA had approved at that time the use of the word that we're using as offsets in lieu of depositing the funds in a dedicated account. So a moment ago when I talked about that we had submitted to FAA a list of projects that were funded by various accounts, that's what we're talking about, that the state said rather than putting all of the funds in one account and spending them that way, we'd rather spend them through a variety of programs, but we'll keep track of those to make sure that we're still reaching that required kind of dollar amount limit by the FAA.
Can you give us an example of what one of our offsets is?
Right off the top of my head, I don't have a specific example, but one that you can be comfortable with is the grants that WashDOT gives to airports are often for things like a runway extension project. So there are runway extension projects in Washington State that are funded by grants from the Department of Commerce. So that's exactly the same kind of project that is already funded by fuel taxes because that's how WashDOT Aviation is supported. But that same project can be funded through a grant from Commerce, and that's one of those other projects. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
So now to kind of finish up with that bullet point, FAA had previously approved the use of these offsets, but now they're saying, okay, if you're going to use the offsets, FAA has to have the ability to approve those projects in advance to make sure that they meet FAA's requirements of being a statewide aviation project. And then I just want to, somebody had asked earlier if we were talking about state fuel taxes. So the last bullet point here, I wanted to point out that this same FAA regulation applies to local fuel taxes. However, that's not really a part of my discussion here because the state of Washington isn't the party that's responsible for compliance with the local fuel tax regulations. The airports are responsible for ensuring that their local taxing authorities are compliant with the FAA rules. So similar, same rule, but different responsible parties. Okay, so then what this all means. Roughly speaking, and this is where this is a very multi-dimensional, many-agency partnership. The numbers come from the Department of Revenue. They're the ones that know how much fuel tax is collected. So we've been working very closely with them. And it looks like going back to that deadline when compliance began back at the end of 2017. So from then until now, there's been roughly $210 million that's been collected of aviation fuel taxes that's not already accounted for being spent on aviation programs. So that's kind of our target. The penalty in federal law is that rather than just sending us a bill for $210 million, the penalty is that USDOT can withhold grants up to 3 times that amount, and this is not just FAA grants, but from any USDOT agency, any grants going to the state of Washington. So that would be highway, rail, transit, any of those grants. So the initial rule, 3 times that amount is the penalty, so that's what could be withheld in grants. And then in 2024, the FAA was reauthorized, and that reauthorization legislation increased that enforcement amount to twice what it otherwise was, which means it's totally now 6 times the enforcement amount. So that puts us in the ballpark of $1.2 billion of transportation grant funds that could be withheld by the federal government if they chose to take that course of enforcement action. Additionally, FAA has the ability to file a lawsuit. So that's the background that I had for you today. Here's my information if anybody has more questions for me.
And Steve, are you there for questions or do you have a presentation?
Correct, I'm just here for questions.
Okay, great. It looks like we have a few questions. Senator Hasagawa.
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I'm just curious on what authority does the federal government have to tell us how we use our state tax dollars? Is it through the Commerce Clause issue, and if so, can we just tax on that portion of the fuel that's used within the state?
I don't have the citation before me. It is linked to that the state receives grant funding from the USDOT. So I believe that if the state stopped taking grant money from the federal government, that would relieve us of these responsibilities. I'm not 100% sure of that, though.
Senator Conway?
I'm assuming our airlines pay this tax, right? At the airport, major Sea-Tac.
Airlines are exempted from some of the fuel tax, so they pay a smaller amount of fuel tax, and probably my colleague from Department of Revenue has a better handle on who pays what portion of it.
So when we talk about the fuel tax that is subject to this FAA regulation, it is actually a number of taxes, Senator. It's the aircraft fuel tax. It is certain, again, Ann talked about the non-grandfathered amounts of local sales and use tax. It's the hazardous substance tax, it's the petroleum products tax, and it's the oil spill response and oil spill administration tax. So a number of taxes make up the revenue that we're talking about here, that it must comply with the FAA regulation. And so each of those may have a different taxpayer base. And if you want, I'm happy to talk to you about that, or share our tax reference manual that talks about who's subject to these taxes.
You just mentioned the hazardous fuel tax and reminded me that we're talking here about commerce on our bays here and fuel tax on our ships that are coming in and out of our ports. Sounds like, is that correct? I'm not sure what we're talking about here. When I eventually got into this, I was thinking kind of like a gas tax is an aviation tax you pay, when you're gassing up your airplane or whatever. But it sounds like this fuel tax is much broader in the sense that it impacts commerce as well. A lot of commercial activity.
With respect to the state taxes, Senator, I would say that's correct. With respect to the local sales tax that is part of this revenue stream, it is local sales tax that is derived from fuel sales at airports.
Okay. Can you give us, can we get a breakdown of that? If we're going to take action on a bill here, I'd like to know more.
Okay.
Any other questions for either of our presenters? Okay, thank you for that overview. That ends the work session, and we're going to move into public hearing. We have 3 bills at the top of our list that are adjacent to the aircraft fuel tax, which is why we had the work session. So we're going to start with Senate Bill 5989. Tianyi, please give us a briefing.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Senator Robinson and members of the committee. As Senator Robinson just mentioned, the first 3 bills you have today are all related to the revenue redistribution of aircraft fuel taxes. The first bill is SB 5989, sponsored by Senator Banky. As a brief background, a state sales or use tax of 6.5% of the selling price of aircraft fuel is collected from purchasers and users of aircraft fuel in Washington. The revenue is currently deposited into the state general fund. SB 5989 has 2 main components. First, the bill directs a portion of state sales and use taxes on aircraft fuel to the aeronautics account instead of the state general fund. In FY 27, 0.5% of those taxes are redistributed. That percentage will increase to 1% beginning in FY 28. The aeronautics account is administered by Department of Transportation. Expenditure requires appropriation and can only be used for aviation-related purposes. Secondly, the bill also requires the Aviation Division of the Department of Transportation to report certain information to the legislature, including the annual amount of additional funds awarded for airport project and the estimated amount of fund, returned to the general fund, accounting for sales and business and occupation taxes generated by those funded airport projects. This bill takes effect July 1st, 2026. Turning to the fiscal impact, there is a partial fiscal note available in your EBB. Even though the bill provides an effective date, the Department of Revenue indicates they cannot implement the change until January 1st, 2027, which is also the earliest date of implementation for the following 2 bills. In terms of revenue impact, this legislation will decrease the general fund state by an estimated amount of $900,000 for fiscal year 27 and about $4.1 million in FY 28. The total 4-year outlook impact is approximately $9.2 million. For administration, DOR requests $454,000 in FY27 for 2.3 FTEs to set up program system changes, process and exam data, and assess taxpayers with reporting. The 4-year cost is in total $617,000. The fixed note for WashDOT is not yet available, and that concludes my remark for this bill. Happy to take questions.
Any questions for Tianyi? Okay. Did you want to? Sure, Senator Binky.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real quick, this is really accountability where we got to meet the requirements for the FAA. You heard about the staggering numbers. When this is straightforward, we can meet those compliance requirements. We have the accountability within the bill, and you're going to hear some of the testimony that's going to come out with some of the staggering numbers that they presented to me about getting us into compliance, getting us that trustworthiness, and getting the projects up to speed of what we need to do across the board. Aviation safety is a key element of our society nowadays, and we want to build this into future operations. And looking forward to any answers and chatting. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I think we have one person who signed in person. John Flanagan, are you here? Please come forward, and if we could have our tech people bring in the folks who signed in remotely so we can hear from them next. We are going to have a 1-minute timer on testimony today. We have a number of bills and a lot of people who want to testify, so when you see the light turn red, please wrap up. If there's more that you want to tell us, you are always welcome to submit written testimony. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, John Flanagan, Senior State Government Relations at the Port of Seattle, here today testifying in support of Senate Bill 5989, and I'll wait on the other ones. We support the measured and incremental approach taken here. Per the testimony that you'll hear from others today, we appreciate that the bill ensures federally restricted aviation dollars are put back towards aviation-related spending without creating deficits in other critical programs. I think of the 3 bills that you'll hear on this topic today, this is probably the one that takes the most delicate approach, I'll say. Thanks.
Okay. Let's see. Brad Schuster.
Good afternoon, Chair Robinson, committee members. On behalf of nearly 10,000 aircraft owners and pilots association members residing in the state, I'm requesting that you all support Washington Senate Bill 5989 with your yes vote today. I'm testifying as a pilot, a Washington State resident, and the AOPA Northwest Mountain Region Manager. Thank you, Senators Banky and Dozier, for sponsoring this important bill. The almost 150 Washington State public use airports are crumbling. It's our state airport system and serves everyone. At the end of 2023, that system was $60 million short of what has been asked for. As was mentioned, aviation taxes should have all along been going to airports. To answer Senator Hasegawa, it's Public Law 100-223. It's called the Airway Safety and Capacity Expansion Act of 1987, which requires that any taxes on fuel enacted after that time need to be directed at airports. Appreciate your support for this bill.
Thank you, and my apologies. Josh Marcy, are you in the room? I didn't somehow skipped over that you were in person as well, so please come forward. And then after Josh, we'll wrap up with Jim Kuntz on Zoom.
Hi, good morning. My name is Josh Marcy. I'm the Washington Airport Management Association president. I represent 70 airports of the 130 public use airports in the state of Washington, and WAMA supports 5989. This 5989 directs portions of state retail and use tax on aircraft fuel, WashDOT, to a WashDOT Aeronautics account, directing 1% of the 6.5 sales tax on fuel to airports through WashDOT. As you've heard through this session, airports are pretty focused on getting aircraft fuel taxes in compliance, and this would help with that. WAMA Airports supports this initiative, but our highest focus relates to the state and local taxes not being in compliance with FAA grant assurances, and airports are economic drivers for the states communities, and additional funding through WashDOT helps airports maintain that infrastructure. The fiscal note estimates that this would WashDOT's annual budget would double, and we must invest in our airports and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Jim Kuntz.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair, Ranking Member, and committee members. Let me start my
Jim?
video.
Oh, you got your video. Okay, great.
Great.
Go ahead. Oh, now we can't hear you. We can see you, but can't hear you.
Okay, how's that, Madam
That's
Chair?
wonderful.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of 5989. We think this is really a great bill. Our focus, I'm the CEO of the Chelan Douglas Regional Port Authority. We own 3 airports in Eastern Washington. Our focus is to get the state of Washington fully compliant with all aviation fuel taxes to go to aviation across the state of Washington. The state now is 9 years out of compliance, and I believe the FAA is looking very closely at trying to get the state in compliance. WSDOT recently, in the presentation earlier today, talked about an FAA letter submitted to the state. The FAA says in the last legislative session, $82 million of appropriations theoretically to aviation projects do not qualify. 82 million. That's going to have to be reappropriated according to the FAA. This bill is a good start. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes the public testimony and the public hearing on Senate Bill 5989. Let's move on to Senate Bill 5898. Boy, Senator Binky, you really lined up those numbers. All right, Tianyi, please give us a briefing.
Hello again. For the record, Tianyi Lan, committee staff. SB 5898 in front of you now is also sponsored by Senator Banky. It redirects tax revenues on aircraft fuels from hazardous substance tax, petroleum product tax, and oil spill response tax to the aeronautics account. Under current law, such revenues are deposited into several dedicated accounts. For HST, the motor vehicle fund received the first $50 million for transportation, stormwater activity, and project, and 3 model toxic control accounts received the remaining funds based on the percentage listed in the bill report. PPT revenue is deposited into the Pollution Liability Insurance Program Trust Account. Revenue from the oil spill response tax are deposited into the oil spill response tax account. A partial fiscal note is available in your EBB. On the revenue side, the bill will move an estimated $8.4 million from the model toxic control accounts and pollution liability insurance trust account to the aeronautics account in FY27, and an estimated amount of $21.6 million in FY28. The 4-year number is around $53 million. To note, there is a small drafting error where the code revisor was converting the PPT tax rate to its numeric form, and this fiscal estimate is based on the assumption that this will be corrected and the rate is unchanged. Due to the revenue reduction of the model toxics control accounts, Ecology points out in their fiscal note that this bill might have potential impact on both their operating and capital budget. In short, assuming the revenue loss requires equivalent reduction to Ecology's expenditure authority in those MTCA accounts. In the 27-29 biennium, this would equal to an amount of $38 million reduction, and that is about 57 FTE reduction and 1.7 million reduction in contracts and about 50 million in their grant funding. We are still waiting for the fixed note for the Washington Pollution Liability Insurance Agency, whose budget is supported by the Pollution Liability Insurance Trust Account. And with that, happy to take questions.
Other questions for Tianyi? Okay, thanks for the briefing. Let's go to public testimony. Let's see here. Okay, John Flanagan, Eric Fitch, and Josh Marcy. Why don't we start with you? Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. For the record, once again, John Flanagan, Senior State Government Relations at the Port of Seattle. I'm here today testifying other regarding Senate Bill 5898. Although we support the fact that this bill would bring the state back into full compliance with the longstanding FAA guidelines on use of aviation-related fuel tax, we are concerned about unintended impacts to other programs that are critical to the port's operations and to many of the folks that you'll hear from today, i.e. MATCA. And also, we want to be conscious of impacts to other, the fact that the legislature has many difficult fiscal decisions to make this year, and it's a big amount of money. Thanks.
Thank you. Eric.
Thank you, Chair Robinson, Ranking Member Gilden. Eric Fitch, Executive Director of the Washington Public Ports Association, also signed in other on 5898. Ports around the state develop and operate transportation facilities to promote economic development. That includes airports and marine terminals. We have a nuanced perspective on this proposal. As you can imagine, having just heard from our biggest member, we do support the state getting back into compliance and have a lot of members who you'll hear from with that concern. But our ports also draw down the MODCA account, spending remedial action grants on critical environmental cleanups that turn contaminated sites back to productive use. If nothing else, this confirms a position we've shared with this committee before, that diverting MOTCA funds to funds other than environmental cleanup purposes is a challenge for our members. So with that, we'd welcome inclusion in future discussions about this bill and this issue, and we thank you for your time.
Great. Go ahead.
Thank you again, Josh Marcy, President of WAMA, also the Airport Director at Payne Field. We're supporting 5898 as an investment into Washington's airports and Washington's future. Washington airports generate $107 billion a year in business revenues, $26.8 billion in labor income, approximately 410,000 jobs, and $913 million in statewide tax impacts. So it's about from 2018. Right now, the WashDOT aviation budget is about $6.8 million, and airports receive less than $2 million from ecology for environmental cleanups. And airports total receive less than $10 million annually from the state. In comparison, we receive about $70 to $80 million a year from the FAA, and we would like to see that change. The Senate Bill 5898 is critical to help our airports so we can continue to invest in our future and our capacity and efficiency within aviation in our state. Just for one example, Payne Field has spent approximately $500,000 in state grant funds with a leverage of $16 million in federal grant funds over the past decade.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's have Frank Dawson and Dawson Frank, apologize for that, and Travis Dutton, please come up.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Dawson Frank. I'm the legislative chair for the WAMA, the Washington Airport Management Association, and also a deputy director at Payne Field. It is a complicated topic. I'm not going to lie to you, it's very complicated. But for us, the airport side, Grant Assurance 25, airport revenues, is what requires our taxes from aircraft fuel to go after 1987 to go to aviation or airports. There are 6 state taxes on aircraft fuel. Most of the ones we are talking about today are paid when the fuel is delivered at the airport. Only the state excise tax currently is directed to WashDOT's aviation fund. There are many numbers here. If I had to have a slogan, it would be 5898 is great, because that is the one that gets us in compliance with the FAA for the hazardous substance tax, the petroleum product tax, and the oil spill admin fee. Again, this has a major impact, and please note, if you exclude Sea-Tac, the other 20 largest airports in the state spent $233 million on capital projects in 2024. There's a big need to fund our infrastructure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Chair, members of the committee, Travis Dutton, representing the Washington State Association of Counties and our county solid waste programs. I really wish I'd prepared a slogan as well. But as you've heard from quite a few already, MATCA is a critical funding source for a lot of environmental, groundwater, and human health programs. Counties rely heavily on it to manage our household hazardous waste programs. Like gas tax revenue, this account is already facing increasing pressure as counties are asked to do more to meet environmental and public health goals, while our revenue declines as the state reduces our reliance on fossil fuels, appropriately so. Our concern is that the changes to the aviation fuel tax could further weaken MATCA without addressing how those losses will be offset. We've been engaged in discussions around long-term sustainability of MATCA for most of a decade. However, those discussions have not yet led to a clear or durable path forward. As you consider these changes, please consider also pairing them with a plan to keep MATCA account whole so that counties and state agencies can continue delivering these services. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Carrie Sessions, do you want to testify or you are there to answer? You want to testify. Okay, please come forward. I wasn't sure if you just wanted to answer questions.
Thank you for fitting me in. Chair Robinson, members of the committee, my name is Carrie Sessions. I work as the Director of Governmental Relations at the Department of Ecology. While questions on the appropriate use of aircraft fuel tax revenue are beyond Ecology's purview, we are concerned that a secondary impact of the bill is a significant reduction of revenue to MATCA. MATCA serves as a primary funding mechanism to fund our state's work to prevent and clean up pollution and provides critical pass-through money to local governments and tribes to protect communities from pollution and contamination. The decrease in revenue to MATCA would come at a time when current appropriation levels in MATCA are already exceeding anticipated revenue. And so we're concerned that this will significantly hinder both our and local government's ability to clean up polluted sites and protect clean water. We ask in your deliberation of this issue to please mitigate the impacts on MATCA, and should the legislature determine that revenue should not be deposited into MATCA, we encourage discussions on ways to backfill this revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go online to Brad Schuster.
Good afternoon once again, Chair Robinson, committee members. I'm Brad Schuster, Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, Northwest Mountain Region Manager, and I'm requesting that all of you support Washington Senate Bill 5898, aircraft fuel tax proceeds, in your yes vote today. Thank you, Senators Banky, Christian, Cleveland, and Dozier for sponsoring this important bill. Make no mistake about it, Public Law 100-223, the Airway Safety and Capacity Expansion Act of 87, requires that any taxes enacted on fuel after 1987 is required to go from those aviation fuel taxes to airports, not other accounts. The request that you continue to divert illegally those funds from some of these other entities, it should never have happened, and it needs to stop. Your state public airport is at least $60 million short of what's needed. This bill takes the first right step towards ensuring that fuel taxes are directed towards airports. Supporting Senate Bill 5898 and Senate Bill 5989, which you just heard about, simultaneously provide that assistance to airports and give us a positive first step towards complying with federal law with respect to legal uses of aviation fuel tax. I'm available for questions. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Jim Kuntz. Jim, you're muted.
Unmuted. Thank you, Ranking Member. And Madam Chair and Ranking Member, thank you for the opportunity to speak in support of Senate Bill 5898. This is really important to get into compliance with the Federal Aviation Administration. Every airport in the state that gets FAA money certifies that our aviation fuel taxes are spent within the state. So we are very concerned about that. Just a couple things to remind you, we're 9 years out of compliance with the Federal Aviation Administration. The director of the department just said we're $1.2 billion could be what WSDOT could withhold in funds with further non-compliance. And then the FAA's recent letter to the state disqualified $82 million of previous expenditures that were thought to be offsets. I think it's time to comply to make sure that the federal government does not come in with forced compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public testimony, public hearing on Senate Bill 5898. We'll move on to Senate Bill 6240. Tianyi, please give us a briefing.
Hello again. For the record, Tianyi Land Committee staff, SB6240 in front of you creates a state aircraft noise and air quality mitigation account to receive a portion of hazardous substance tax revenue on aviation fuel. Beginning October 1st, 2026, the deposit amount equals to the portion of the tax rate exceeding 1.48 per barrel multiplied by the number of barrels of aviation fuel. The HST rate on aviation fuel is 1.48 per barrel for fiscal 26, and the tax rate is adjusted annually by inflation. Expenditure from the new account may be used only by the Department of Commerce to establish a grant program to fund mitigation strategies within aviation-impacted communities related to aviation-related air quality and noise impact. The bill also requires taxpayers on the possession of aviation fuel to report to the Department of Revenue the quantity of barrels and tax due on a separate line. In terms of fiscal impact for revenue shift, the bill would move an estimated $120,000 from MACA accounts to the new account in FY27, an estimated amount of $800,000 in FY28, and around $2.2 million over the 4-year outlook. Similar to last bill, Ecology indicate that they may experience corresponding reduction in their capital and operating budget due to the revenue loss of MACA accounts. For implementation, DOR will incur total cost of $237,000 in FY27 and around $300,000 over 4-year outlook period. Department of Commerce fiscal note shows an indeterminate impact as a grant program will be subject to appropriation. And before I wrap up, for reference, there is a comparison table in your electronic bill book. The table includes taxes involved of each bill and their distribution policy, the usage of the funds that are being distributed, the effective date of the bill, and also the fiscal impact of the first full year of implementation. And the last line is whether the tax are subject to the Federal Aviation Administration policy. And with that, I'll stop talking.
Thank you for preparing the chart for us. That's really helpful. Senator Dozier.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One quick question. Is this an allowable use of MOTCA funds for this? Because aren't MOTCA funds supposed to go for toxic cleanup?
Yeah, under current law, revenues from hazardous substance tax are going to MACA, but this bill, I'm talking specifically for the second one, 5898, it will distribute the revenue to aeronautics account. So MACA accounts would receive less revenue as a result of this bill.
Okay, any other questions? All right, thank you for the briefing. Let's hear from, I see John Flanagan ready to go. So let's have John Flanagan, Eric Fitch, Peter Godlewski. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. For the record, one final time, John Flanagan, Senior State Government Relations at the Port of Seattle, here testifying other regarding Senate Bill 6240. We appreciate the prime sponsor's intention under the bill and support her efforts to dedicate a portion of aviation fuel taxes towards ongoing mitigation, but we'd like to work on the bill with her to restructure a little bit. For example, we'd prefer to see 6240 attached to a broader fix on the ongoing aviation fuel tax diversion issue, and to see mitigation added to the allowable uses of the aeronautics account potentially, and then a cap on the per annum or per biennial cycle, something like that. We hope to continue working with the prime sponsor to find a solution that's agreeable to all of the interested parties. Thanks.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, Eric Fitch, Washington Public Ports Association, signed in with a thrilling and helpful other position on 6240. This proposal appears to dedicate some portion of the hazardous substance tax to an aviation-related purpose, and as I said before, we appreciate the need to resolve revenue diversion issues. However, we are concerned that, at least as currently drafted, this new account might not be compliant with FAA requirements and hence not get us closer to that solution, and it does continue the concerning trend of transfers out of MOTCA, further threatening the solvency of that account. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Peter Godlewski with the Association of Washington Business, signed in con this evening, echoing the same concerns you just heard from Eric about the transfer of the the transfer of the HST from the MOTCA account. We are concerned by the ongoing pressures off the MOTCA account and the drawdown that has been identified by the Department of Ecology. We do not think this is the best path forward and would urge a no on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Dawson Frank and J.C. Harris, please come forward.
Good afternoon again. Dawson Frank for the record, which is for the Washington Airport Management Association, Legislative Chair. Airports oppose 6240 as currently written. WashDOT, for two reasons. WashDOT Aviation Department and the Aeronautics account is the best stewards of funds to airports. They do a lot with a limited budget to make a huge impact in the over 100 airports in the state. And in the airport's eyes, any state tax on aircraft fuel should be directed to WashDOT to manage it. Directing funds to commerce complicates the issue and does not focus on the state's aviation plan, and we are always worried about making sure we are in compliance with our FAA grant assurances. The state, through WashDOT, has the very similar airport grant assurances as the FAA does, and keeping in compliance with the FAA's requirements. So please help ensure we continue to focus on our economic drivers at airports and make sure that any tax dollars from aircraft fuel are directed to WashDOT. We ask you oppose 6240 as currently written, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is J.C. Harris. I'm here today on behalf of Sea-Tac Noise.info, which is 1,300 homeowners with bad port packages, sound insulation. Because I am the only person you will hear from today with port package issues, I beg a few extra seconds. I'm going off script here. I think it's fair to say that revenue diversion, Title 49, is Byzantine. And just the fact that you're dealing with 3 bills today says something. The FAA and the will of Congress is to take a very dim view of revenue diversion. Although sound insulation is a legitimate use of airport funds, it is never provided for. The reason we support 6240 is because it establishes a fundamental principle, ongoing structural revenue for the few people who live around the airport who suffer from the impacts, so that the rest of the state can obtain billions of dollars of ongoing benefit. We have no opinion on the other 2 bills because no matter how many millions of dollars they may generate, it makes us no difference if none of them can be applied to people living under the flight path. I urge you to support SB 6240, and I thank you for your time.
Thanks. Thanks for being here. Okay, we're going to go online. Brian Davis. Brian, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. My name is Brian Davis, speaking on my own behalf, but very much out of my experience as Vice Chair of the Burien Airport Committee. Our airport communities recognize the economic importance of Sea-Tac International, but in Burien, the airport does more harm than good. The Port of Seattle is currently pursuing a multi-billion-dollar expansion that would allow a 30% increase in aircraft operations over the next 10 years. Federal noise regulations do not take into account the devastating cumulative impacts of this ever-increasing traffic. SB6240 would help facilitate the repair and replacement of those noise insulation port packages installed over the years in homes near the airport. Many have failed. Many of the people who live in those properties can't afford the necessary repairs. Earmarking a small share of the proceeds from the aviation fuel tax would set up allocation of critical funds for this work. And I would argue that programs like this are exactly why the tax exists. If you combine these funds with the potential funding streams, state, federal, and local, you'd have a pool of resources large enough to where we could actually get some repairs done. And so far, there has not been one port package fixed. We must step up our protection of residents below the flight path. SB 6240 would help make that happen, and I thank you.
Thank you. Brad Schuster.
Good afternoon. Once again, Chair Robinson, committee members. I am Brad Schuster, the OPA Northwest Mountain Region Manager, requesting your opposition to Washington Senate Bill 6240 and your no vote in this committee. First of all, to make clear, the FAA, through the Part 139 process, does provide funding for noise-impacted residences following a Part 139 study. This bill's creation of a noise and air quality mitigation account would both unnecessarily duplicate the FAA noise program and unnecessarily duplicate the efforts of the FAA Energy Emissions Division and eliminate gasoline lead emissions programs, which are collectively making great progress towards eliminating lead in aviation fuel by 2030. Codification of a state-level aviation noise emissions account through this bill would allow or be made tantamount to endorsing continued illegal theft from your state airports via the revenue diversion from aircraft fuel taxes. As we said, our state airports need at least $60 million more. I request that your committee does not pass Washington Senate Bill 6240, as your opposition to this bill is in the best interest of Washington state aviation and all Washingtonians. Thank you. I'll remain available for questions.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Rebecca Deming.
Chair Robinson, Vice Chair, and members of the committee, I am Rebecca Deming, the Community Development Director for the City of Des Moines. I am here today to express the city's strong support for Senate Bill 6240. As a community located directly under the primary flight paths of Sea-Tac Airport, the residents of Des Moines face a disproportionate environmental and public health burden from airport operations. For years, our community has experienced the cumulative impacts of ultrafine particles and persistent aircraft noise, which disrupt daily life, education, and long-term health outcomes. SB 6240 is a vital step towards environmental justice for airport-impacted communities by directing a portion of the hazardous substance tax already collected on aviation fuel back into the communities most affected by its use. This bill provides a sustainable funding source for essential mitigation efforts. For the City of Des Moines, this is not just a policy request, it's a fiscal and ethical necessity. The cost of mitigating these regional impacts should not fall solely on the local taxpayers of small cities. We urge you to pass out of committee and ensure our residents receive environmental protections and health safeguards they deserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Wagner.
Hello, I'm a former administrator of Quiet Skies Coalition of Burien, and I would like to state that your decision on this will reflect whether you are pro-industry and for the airports or for the people who are suffering under the flight path and the onslaught of the terrible pollution, sleepless nights, unmitigated environmental hazards that are coming from the noise and emissions from these aircraft flying over them over 600 times per day. The airport is pumping nearly 700 million gallons of Jet A fuel annually, which has a huge environmental impact. So if you care about the health of the people living around the airport, many children, all these environmental justice eligible communities, you'll do the right thing and show that you care about the people you serve. Thank you.
Thank you. And Maria Batayola.
Thank you, Chair Robinson and the rest of the committee. My name is Maria Batiola, and I serve as Chair of Aviation Community Health, Environment, and Climate Advocates. Our core team includes Beacon Hill Council, Duwamish River Community Coalition, Climate Solutions, Defenders of Highline Forest, and 3 Action Seattle. I think the really important piece here is when we're talking about environmental impact mitigation, it isn't just the built environment, but also the built environment of the people who have been impacted in terms of their health. The legislature has been really positive in our experience for 10 years now, going back to 2017. You funded health impact study, other impact study, flight demand increase. You also funded in 2024 air health mitigation study and failed aviation soundproofing packages. And then you also passed Climate Commitments Act that identified air pollution overburdened communities in South Seattle and South King County that will be from aviation. So a fact of it is that Sea-Tac Airport has limited noise pollution mitigation and no air pollution mitigation program. The 2025 King County Strategic Climate Action Plan identified Sea-Tac as emitting 13% of all King County greenhouse gas emissions. The journey's been too long. We're patient with the studies. Please help us as we continue to suffer. Please pass 6240. Thank you so much for the extra time.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Okay, that concludes public testimony in the public hearing on 6240. Let's move on to number 4 on the agenda, Senate Bill 6244. Tianya, it's your turn again.
Thank you, Senator Robinson, and hello for the very last time. The bill before you now is Senate Bill 6244, sponsored by Senator Torres, in regards to extending an existing hazardous substance tax exemption. By way of background, the 2015 legislature enacted an exemption for certain pesticides from hazardous substance tax. Eligible pesticides are chemicals used to prevent or control disease, weeds, or other pests that either warehoused in Washington or transported to or from Washington and not manufactured, packaged, sold, or used in Washington. The 2024 legislature extended the expiration date of the exemption to January 1st, 2028. SB6240 in front of you extend the exemption for another 10 years to January 1st, 2038. In terms of fiscal impact, the bill will decrease state revenue from hazardous substance tax for market accounts by estimates about 72,000 in FY28 and by about 168,000 in FY29. For expenditure, DOR and JLAC combined request 29,000 in the 25-27 biennium and 35,000 for the 4-year for their implementation. The fiscal note from Department of Ecology is not yet available, and that concludes my remarks.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. Do we have Mark Struley and Ben Buchholz? Please come forward, and then we'll go online for Matthew Ewers.
Thank you, Chair Robinson, members of the committee, for hearing this bill. My name is Ben Buchholz, here today on behalf of Far West Agribusiness Association, as well as several other agricultural organizations. The Washington State agricultural industry would ask you to support Senate Bill 6244 as it is written. The tax preference puts Washington agriculture on equal competitive footing with Oregon and Idaho. For storing much needed crop protection, pesticides, and fertilizers in Washington State instead of outside of the state in Idaho and Oregon. If there was a pest infestation in our state, we would need those products that day instead of waiting a week for them to be trained in from somewhere else. That's why originally this exemption was put in place by Governor Gregoire. She found it very important that we had food security and we had the products to take care of the pest infestations if we needed it right then. Thank you for your support.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Mark Struley here today on behalf of the Washington Association Wheat Growers, the Washington Potato and Onion Association, the Washington Cattlemen's Association, here in full support of the bill. We appreciate the security that this allows for our farmers, knowing that those pesticides and fertilizers are right there in the warehouse within the state. Second, we really appreciate the 10-year extension in the bill. We think with a shorter extension, they just won't invest to build the warehouse to build in this state, and they're state-of-the-art facilities. It's not just a lean-to where you're parking, you know, the manure spreader. These things are a big deal, climate-controlled, and that creates jobs in the rural area, which not every kid's coming back to the farm, so we appreciate that too. Thank you.
Okay, you packed a lot in there. Let's go online to Matthew Ewers.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair Robinson and members of the Senate Ways and Means Committee. My name is Matt Ewers from Spokane, and I represent myself. I'm a principal with IEDS Logistics, offering regional warehouse distribution services in our state. I'm here to urge you to extend the tax preference via Senate Bill 6244. This bill will make it economically feasible to stage projects in Washington State for regional distribution in the Pacific Northwest. It maintains the safety of the products by storing in specifically engineered hazmat facilities until needed by farmers. It increases the speed to farm for farmers. It allows the applicators to procure only when product is needed and the correct amount needed. It reduces the amount of product applied in the fields. It eliminates the necessity for farmers to purchase product out of state and store them in barns or sheds. It provides jobs for Washington citizens. We have built 2 large DCs in Pasco because of this bill, which created jobs, property tax, and B&O taxes. I'm here to answer any questions, especially if you'd like to know how this bill will reduce the amount of product used in Washington State. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that concludes the public testimony and the public hearing on 6244. We'll now move on to number 5 on the agenda, Senate Bill 6231. If we could get a briefing from Alia, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Alia Kennedy, staff to the committee. The bill before you is Senate Bill 6231, which is governor request legislation limiting the sales and use tax exemption for computer data centers. For some background, there are 2 separate sales and use tax exemptions available to eligible computer data centers, depending on where they are located. The first is the rural data center tax exemption. This exemption is available to data centers located in rural counties. There are currently 30 counties that meet this definition. Next, in 2022, the legislature enacted the non-rural or urban data center tax exemption. This exemption applies to data centers located in counties with a population above 800,000. This currently includes King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties. The tax exemption for both the rural and non-rural data centers lasts for up to 12 years and may be used to purchase original server equipment or replacement server equipment until the exemption expires. Additionally, the exemption may be used to purchase equipment for a newly constructed data center or refurbishment of an existing data center. The Department of Revenue may only issue a certain amount of exemption certificates each year on a first-in-time basis. For data centers located in urban counties, DOR may issue no more than 6 exemption certificates each year for both new and refurbished data centers. No exemption certificates may be issued on or after July 1st, 2028. For data centers located in rural counties, there is no limit on the amount of exemption certificates for newly constructed data centers. Exemption certificates for refurbishment are limited to 6 per year. No exemption certificates may be issued to rural county data centers on or after July 1st of 2036. Turning to the bill before you, it repeals the sales and use tax exemption for data center refurbishments for both rural and non-rural data centers effective July 1st, 2026. The repeal applies to both existing and future exemption certificates. This means that previously issued exemption certificates for data center refurbishments may no longer be used on or after July 1st, 2026. The bill also makes purchases of replacement server equipment ineligible for the tax exemption. As a result, the exemption applies only to purchases of original server equipment. A preliminary fiscal note is posted to the EBB. The bill is estimated to increase state revenue by $63.1 million this biennium and $144 million in the 27-29 biennium. There are also 4-year expenditure impacts of about $1.1 million for Department of Revenue administrative costs. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Are there questions for Alio? Okay, I don't see any. Thank you. Sherry Sawyer, Corey Miller, Paul Jewell, please come forward. And following them, we'll have Matthew Hepner and Michael Transu.
Good afternoon, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. I'm Sherry Sawyer with the Office of Financial Management, here today to testify in support of Senate Bill 6231. Senator Frame, thanks very much for sponsoring the bill. You know, Governor Ferguson, 2026 supplemental operating budget really strove to take a balanced approach, protecting critical services, making targeted cuts, and raising new revenue by closing outdated tax benefits that primarily benefit a small number of corporations. So as staff mentioned, Washington currently waives the sales tax on replacement server equipment and qualifying data centers, which was intended to attract investment and jobs, particularly in rural communities. However, over time, data centers became major users of electricity and created fewer permanent jobs than originally anticipated. The bill before you would end the exemption by July 1st, 2026 for refurbishment only, and this gives operators time to plan and contribute more fairly to the grid and infrastructure that they depend on. So I urge your support and happy to answer any questions.
Senator Warnick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Sherry, do you have any idea if this is repealed, if this bill is passed, how many current jobs would be impacted, and especially in the rural counties?
I don't have that information for you, Senator, but I can try to get it for you. I do know that it was used by about 25 data centers this last year, but I don't know how that translates to jobs, but I can do my darndest to find out for you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other questions. Thank you. Paul?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Paul Jewell on behalf of the members of the Washington State Association of Counties, testifying today in support of Senate Bill 6231. Tax exemptions are a tough issue for our members. Counties, as you know, are the least revenue diversified major government structure in Washington state. We rely heavily on really two sources to provide general government functions, and sales tax is one of the largest. Since 2007, JLARC has conducted published reviews on more than 89 different sales and use tax exemptions currently in place in our state. It is the cumulative impact of all the sales tax preferences, not to mention the numerous other tax exemptions authorized by the state on local government revenues, that has us concerned. Very conservatively, the sales tax revenue losses equal about $300 to $800 million per biennium for local governments, depending on local sales and tax rates and other things like that. This bill represents an opportunity to make a little progress and help local service providers like counties that rely so heavily on sales tax revenues to receive some additional funding where the server farms are located. We urge your support. Thank you.
Thank you. I assume Corey Miller is not here. So let's have Matthew Hepner and Michael Transu come forward, please.
Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Michael Transu. I'm here today testifying in respectful opposition to Senate Bill 6231 on behalf of the Tacoma Pierce County Chamber. From a historical perspective, many of you may remember in 2022 when we adopted House Bill 1846, and that authorized a data center tax preference for Pierce, King, and Snohomish counties. Before that, the data center preferences were all in the rural counties. This is important because in 2022, there was a lot of marvelous policy reasons as to why this was a good public policy. The data centers are not a theoretical investment. They are proven economic infrastructure. I will forward to the committee an overview of the Centeris Data Center in Puyallup. This was produced a few months ago for the data center work group that shows the number of jobs, the amount of revenue, the property tax increases, et cetera. For the construction phase, 130 union electricians, accounting for more than 275,000 labor hours. In short, the current data center policy is not a tax giveaway. It's a strategic investment that produces job, capital investment, and long-term tax revenue. The evidence shows that it works, and I would respectfully urge for your continued support and vote in opposition of this legislation. Thank you for your consideration, Madam Chair. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Go ahead, Matthew.
Good afternoon, Chair Robinson and committee. For the record, my name is Matthew Hepner, Executive Director of the Certified Electrical Workers of Washington, here in opposition to Senate Bill 6231. Replacing servers is a capital-intensive necessity for data centers. Removing the exemption raises projects' operating costs immediately. Those higher costs are absorbed by operators through delayed upgrade, which reduces work volume for electrical workers. Data center projects support high-skilled electrical work. Higher capital costs and slower replacement cycles means fewer contracts, fewer hours, and less opportunities for on-the-job training for apprenticeships. As reported, we have had over 23,000 construction jobs and over 1,000 after construction jobs since the industry started here. Taxation that increases operating costs makes Washington less attractive compared with other states without sales taxes. This can reduce investment, local supply chain activity, and opportunities for union labor. Removing the exemption would raise costs, reduce work and training opportunities, and weaken Washington's competitiveness for data center investment. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's go to, I'm sorry, Senator Warnick has a question.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. So Matthew, did I hear you say this could impact 23,000 jobs?
Those are the jobs that we've had from the construction.
But what about the replacement of the servers?
On the servers, yeah. So a lot of time the replacement servers is after the initial construction. And I personally worked in 3 data centers in one day. So after they built these refreshes, when the refreshes happen, we come back in and we help with those upgrades, and we're there doing that work. And in that work, we have over 1,000 jobs going on.
Senator Trudeau.
Thank you, and I appreciate those concerns. Is it the concern that, or has it been said, or is there any evidence out there that this tax exemption would prevent them from doing any changes or additional construction? Sorry if I'm missing something, but we'll often hear, right, that like things are going to be impacted if we remove dollars from, that we're exempting from tax base, but I'm just curious, where is that coming from?
So in our case, when we did the bill in 2022, that Centeris data center sat completely vacant for many, many years. And in this world that we live in, this policy world, it isn't very often when you adopt a policy and then see something to fruition come away right after it. And it sat vacant, and now it's almost full and had over $200 million of investments into that facility. So I think there are a lot of incentives that are out there, Oregon in particular, which is where we feel like we've lost a lot of data centers too. So I think the short answer is yes, not having this would certainly curtail investment in our data center community.
Okay, thank you. Let's go online and hear from Dan DiOrio.
Thank you, Chair Robinson and members of the committee. My name is Dan DiOrio, and I'm Vice President of State Policy for the Data Center Coalition, which is the national membership association for the data center industry, including those data center companies that have long invested in Washington communities, testifying in respectful opposition to SB 6240, which will make Washington an uncompetitive data center market and put at risk the nearly 48,000 jobs, $3.64 billion in labor income, and $1.8 billion in state and local tax revenues in the Washington data center market in 2023. Data center sales tax exemption is based on long-standing sales tax exemptions for manufacturing equipment, which are designed to spur continuous investment in economic activity. This allows data centers, most importantly their tenants, such as local financial institutions, healthcare providers, payment processors, and technology companies, to commit to Washington communities for the long term. Senate Bill 6231 threatens harming those communities where data center projects are located or might be located by abruptly ending the program. Washington has seen firsthand the effects of this program going away. When it lapsed in previous years, investment shifted to other states to the detriment of Washington communities. The state should resist making the same mistake again. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Ryan B. Bout.
Good evening, Chair Robinson and members of the committee. My name is Ryan Bebout, Vice President of Savvy Data Centers West. I am here today in respectful opposition to SB 6231. I served as a member of the Governor's Data Center Work Group, where we considered the full spectrum of data center industry, including tax revenue and economic development impacts. The work group did not recommend what is in this bill. Savvy Data Centers currently has facilities in Tukwila, East Wenatchee, and Quincy. The incentive has been tremendously successful in bringing billions of dollars of investment and supporting thousands of family wage union jobs in our local communities. Savvy facilities are multi-tenant, meaning our success is dependent on how competitive our total cost of ownership compares to the 38 other states with similar incentives. When the industry began nearly 20 years ago, Washington enjoyed a significant electricity cost advantage compared to most states, but that advantage is evaporating. With tenants refreshing or refurbishing every 3 to 5 years, this bill significantly increases the total cost of ownership calculation. Our customers will decide not to extend their leases or expand with us, and we will not be able to attract new tenants. We respectfully request that you reject this proposal that hampers our ability to continue contributing to the state economy and to our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Linda Garcia.
Good evening, Chair Robinson and members of the committee. I'm Linda Garcia, Policy Director at Washington State Community Action Partnership, testifying in strong support of SB 6231. Data centers are among the most heavily capitalized industries in modern history, with unprecedented access to private investment. Yet under current law, Washington continues to grant tax exemptions for their ongoing equipment replacement, even as we face painful budget pressures. Every dollar given away through a tax exemption is a dollar that must be cut somewhere else, and every dollar reclaimed is a dollar that can help keep essential services in place when Washingtonians are under pressure. Without this bill, the weight of deeper cuts will land on people who have the least room left to absorb them. Across our network, we see families already stretched to the breaking point, struggling with housing, food, energy, and health care. At a time when some of the most profitable corporations in the world continue to receive special treatment, people should not be the ones asked to absorb that cost. We strongly urge your support for this bill. Thank you for considering our concerns this evening.
Thanks for joining us. Lauren Redfield.
I am a concerned resident of the 36th District testifying in favor of this bill. I actually think this bill should go much stronger,
Lauren,
or should be much stronger.
Are you able to turn your camera on?
Yes. Can you see me now?
Yeah, there you
sorry.
are.
Thank you. Thank you. I believe this bill should go much stronger than it currently does. Tax policy should serve the public, not subsidize speculative, capital-intensive infrastructure. It should support working-class livelihoods and redress racial and class inequities, especially in a state like Washington with a regressive tax system. In 2023 alone, we gave away more than $117 million in foregone revenue for data centers, and we've given away hundreds of millions cumulatively since 2018, with over 65% going to companies like Microsoft. Microsoft, a $1 trillion company, and yet we're paying them. According to Good Jobs First, data center tax breaks can exceed $2 million in lost public revenue per permanent full-time job created. It's among the worst job creation returns of any subsidized industry. Even the largest data centers typically employ fewer than 150 permanent workers, and many employ as few as 25. Meanwhile, the infrastructure the data centers are supporting, artificial intelligence, is going to replace and displace jobs across the country. Is this where we want Washington taxpayer money to go? The precarity of AI models is another reason why the investment is a terrible one, or the precarity of the AI market. The AI sector could face an $800 billion revenue shortfall by 2030 because the enormous investment in data centers outpaces actual revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Avery.
Hey, good evening, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. My name is Ben Avery. I'm the state director of the Sierra Club, grassroots environmental organization representing more than 78,000 members here in Washington state. I want to begin by acknowledging the governor's leadership on this part of the budget. Obviously, he had to weigh many tough choices, as do all of you, as you work to adopt a final budget. Ending this portion of the data center tax preferences was a smart decision by the governor. We would encourage you to follow his lead. Every dollar that goes to subsidizing this affluent industry, powered by a few of the wealthiest companies this world has ever known, is a dollar we're taking away from health assistance, K-12 education, or any of the other worthy priorities we're balancing this budget cycle. It might be a different calculus when you have a budget surplus. It might be a different calculus if you thought that tax incentives had an outsized impact on where data centers are built currently, as opposed to a steady, affordable power supply. But in this budget cycle, Sierra Club members urge you to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public testimony and the public hearing on Senate Bill 6231. We'll now move on to number 6 on our agenda, Senate Bill 6228. Alia, please give us a briefing.
Again, Alia Kennedy, staff to the committee. The bill before you is Senate Bill 6228, which is governor request legislation repealing the preferential business and occupation tax rate for prescription drug resellers. By way of background, the warehousing and reselling of prescription drugs for human use is subject to a reduced B&O tax rate of 0.38% instead of the general wholesaling rate of 0.484%. Pursuant to legislation passed last session, the wholesaling rate will increase to 0.5% starting January 1st, 2027. JLARC, as part of its regular review of tax preferences, last reviewed this tax preference in 2013. At the time, in the absence of a stated public policy objective, JLARC inferred the objective was to reduce a competitive disadvantage for drug resellers with warehouses in Washington as compared to those out of state that do not have nexus to Washington and thus do not pay B&O tax. The recommendation was to continue the tax preference. However, the nexus standards have since changed, and out-of-state warehouses with nexus may be subject to tax the same as in-state warehouses. Turning to the bill before you, the preferential B&O tax rate of 0.138% for prescription drug warehousing and reselling is repealed. Beginning January 1st, 2027, the gross income of businesses warehousing and reselling drugs for human use pursuant to a prescription is subject to a B&O tax rate of 0.5%. A fiscal note is available. The bill is estimated to increase state revenue by $26.5 million in this biennium and $154.6 million in the 27-29 biennium. There are 4-year expenditure impacts of about $232,000 for Department of Revenue administrative costs. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So based on the fiscal note and just the percentage of, I mean, these are small margin companies, so the expectation is that whatever increase we send them in taxes is going to get past the consumer. A big chunk of that consumer is the state through Medicaid or PEB or SEB. Can you have any idea how much of the, what, 26 million or 154 million it's actually cost that would be borne by the state ultimately, if it all passes through?
I do not have that, but I can try to get something to you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Mazzal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one of the purposes of this is inventory management. So they're warehousing and moving that on. Do we have any idea, and probably you can get it back to us all here, but what impact this is going to have on the hospital systems which rely on this for their inventory management?
I would have to get back to you on that one.
Thank you.
Oh, Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that. So it goes from 0.1 to 0.5, which is 4 times higher, and it's even higher than the general B&O tax. Is that correct? Of 0.4?
So currently the general wholesaling rate is the 0.484. That's set to increase starting next year to 0.5, and that's when this bill is effective.
And so that, I'm sorry, if that's okay? Yeah, go ahead. Thank you. So does this also increase from the B&O taxes that the legislature passed last year?
yes, this would be one of the classifications that would be caught into that, yes.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Alia, for the briefing. Let's go to public hearing. Sherry Sawyer, and then following Sherry, we'll have Carolyn Logue, Emily Whitman, Leah Lindahl.
Good afternoon again, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. Sherry Sawyer with the Office of Financial Management here today in support of Senate Bill 6228. And again, thanks to Senator Frame for sponsoring this legislation. As staff mentioned, the special B&O rate was originally meant to level the playing fields for distributors that had a physical presence in Washington because they were at a competitive disadvantage with our neighbors that have warehouses in Oregon that didn't pay Washington B&O. But you all solved that little conundrum in 2015, passing the law that now says that they pay taxes without a physical presence in the state, making this tax preference actually obsolete. It now mainly benefits a group of really large national distributors, not patients. And under this proposal, about 49 wholesalers would move to the standard rate and be treated like any other wholesaler in Washington. And urge your support and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Senator Braun?
Trying to get to the answer to your question, I already texted HCA and see if what they come up with.
That's excellent, but I was going to ask a different question, but I'll take either answer. No, I mean, I get the original reason for the exemption and why that may, things have changed, but, given the margins and the fact that this is going to clearly pass through to the consumer, was there any discussion at OFM or with the governor's staff about just the affordability issue and the cost to consumers and how much we'd actually be saving if that increase in cost got passed through to the state?
Well, I'll have to get back to you on costs being passed along to the state, so I can't answer that question. And as far as affordability, of course, that's on everybody's mind, right? Everybody here, it's on top of mind. The thought being that these are large corporations who are gaining favor with this special B&O rate, and it's their decision whether or not to pass it on to the consumer. We hope that they don't, but that's...
I mean, if you're 1%, you're operating at 1% margins, you really, in addition to the, I think these same companies will have the additional B&O cost as well. So, I mean, you don't really have much choice if you're going to stay in business, right? You can't not make money in business. Or do you have a different plan for business where we don't have to make money?
I can only comment on the 3 large national companies that make up the bulk of who receives the benefit of this special tax preference, and I don't think they're going to be out of business anytime soon.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Kaufman.
Thank you. You had talked about large. Would this also impact small?
It would impact small. I'd have to get back to you on the degree, but it predominantly impacts the 3 national, very large companies that, again, get the bulk of this preferential rate. But yes, it does impact.
Yes, I understand, but there are also small.
They're small.
Well, large, small. So
there are small, yes. I'd have to get back to you on how.
That would be good. That'd be great to see the impact of the small businesses.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Oh, Senator Conway.
Have you given any thought to, they're going to get charged more money and, the pharmacies are the ones who might feel the pinch here. In other words, an increased cost of their product. And I'm wondering, have you talked with the pharmacies or talked with those who are doing the business of, we're losing pharmacies these days, and that is a community issue.
Can I offer that several people are signed in to testify from pharmacies and pharmacy associations?
I will just say, Senator, that this proposal has been before this body for many years. So this is governor's thinking that it's time to sunset this special preference for these predominantly large companies.
All right, thank you. Let's hear from Carolyn Logue, Emily Whitman, Leah Lindahl, and then we'll move online to Jenny Arnold, Rick Hughes, Carrie Vanderhouen, and Chris Schaffner. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Carolyn Logue. I'm here on behalf of the Washington Food Industry Association, representing independent grocery stores and convenience stores across the state, including a dwindling number of grocery stores that are able to offer the one-stop shopping to our citizens and our customers of having a pharmacy in the store as well. It is becoming more and more difficult. We're here opposed to 6228 because it raises the B&O tax on the wholesalers that we have to buy from by more than 3.5 times. That cost does not disappear. It flows directly down the supply chain to our pharmacies. This has been discussed by the Tax Preference Commission and always upheld. The legislature has put this bill down several times. This bill is not going to be paid by PBMs or big pharma. This bill is going to be paid by our patients, our customers, leading to fewer pharmacies, longer travel distance, and less service to the people in this state. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the committee. For the record, Emily Whitman with the Association of Washington Business in opposition to Senate Bill 6228. Make no mistake, we fully expect the cost of this new tax to shift on to, as OFM says, the supply chain. The supply chain are hospitals that are chronically underfunded. It is provider practices and clinics, and ultimately it is our members that provide insurance to their employees and their families that are going to be hit with a higher premium. I will note that previous versions of the bill have looked at dedicating the revenue collected towards a healthcare specific fund. However, as currently written, the bill only directs the cost increases onto health insurers without improving any patient outcomes or having any direct impact on healthcare outcomes. I will also note that I believe 50 taxpayers would be responsible for the bill per the fiscal note, not just 3 large companies. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. My name is Leah Lindahl, Vice President of State Government Affairs for the Healthcare Distribution Alliance. I'm here in respectful opposition to the bill. HDA members are the link between manufacturers and where Washington patients receive their care. Each business day, we deliver over 10 million products to over 330,000 hospitals, pharmacies, nursing homes, et cetera. And in Washington, we operate 5 distribution centers, employ nearly 1,000 residents in the state, as well as deliver medicine to over 5,000 facilities across Washington. Distribution centers in the state are what keeps medicine moving safely, securely, and on time, often same-day delivery to the pharmacies in your state. These are shorter, reliable routes. They create critical infrastructure in the state. We have serious concerns. Our operations are roughly net profit of 0.3% in 2025. Generally, across the board, it's been less than 1%. Those profits are going, or this new tax revenue is going to have to go down to pharmacies, to hospitals, because it simply cannot be absorbed. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
I believe Senator Frame has a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So Emily, just listening to your testimony, I guess my question to you is, isn't the testimony you just offered true for any business in the state of Washington, given that the B&O tax is on gross receipts, not net? And is there a particular reason why you believe that this industry believes special treatment versus any other one of your members that pay the B&O tax and pay regular rates?
I think anytime we're seeing the price of something go up, especially in healthcare, we want to see a direct benefit to the quality or value of the healthcare we're getting. So right now, this is just an additional tax that isn't going to get directed to any patient outcomes, affordability within the state. It's just going to go into the general fund. So
follow up, Madam Chair.
Sure.
An additional tax, I want to clarify, this is changing this to the same rate that every other business in this class pays.
Yes.
Is that true?
That is true, but someone has to pay for the $54 million in tax revenue, and we constantly see our healthcare premiums go up as a direct result of increased taxes. I mean, 2%, I think last year was just related to federal tax tariffs, so we definitely will see this passed on to us.
Can I add on here? I think there's a different spin to this that doesn't exist in any other, because I represent independent grocers. We purchase everything on the wholesale. You got to remember that with everything else, that price, that increase here can be passed on to the customer. In this case, it cannot. Those reimbursements for those drugs that the pharmacies purchase are capped often by the PBMs. There's limits to, it's not an open market like other products are. And that's one of the significant problems with this bill, is you've got this tax break in a way that, because we cannot at the pharmacy level, at the retail level, charge and get reimbursed for all the costs we've expended. So this is a way that the state has been helping out to make sure and take some of the pressure off. Thank you.
Senator Braun.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure who would answer this, but I want to be clear. The companies involved in this business also subject to the 0.5% increase in B&O from last session?
Yeah. More than 250.
Thank you, Chair. Senator Braun, yes, that is correct. So that would bring us up to about 1% in a tax, where we're at about 0.3% in net profit margin.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Thank you for the conversation. Let's go online to Jenny Arnold.
Good morning, Chair. Good evening, Chair Robinson and members of the committee. I am Dr. Jenny Arnold, a pharmacist and CEO of the Washington State Pharmacy Association. I am opposed to Senate Bill 6228. Increasing the B&O tax on prescription medication wholesalers directly increases the price of medications in Washington. Thank you, Senator Conway. Pharmacies cannot pass on increased medication costs because of their contracts with PBMs. 99% of what a pharmacy is paid goes directly into purchasing medications. With the remaining 1%, pharmacies pay for rent, salary, supplies, and half of that margin goes to pay the pharmacy's B&O tax on that same medication. Wholesalers also operate on very thin margins. Pharmacy deserts are a real concern. One large wholesaler has already started charging a surplus fee on Washington pharmacies to pass on the impact of the surplus B&O tax. To save pharmacies, this committee should not double tax prescription medications, perhaps considering carving out pharmaceuticals from critical access pharmacies' B&O taxes may be helpful. So please maintain this preferential tax rate on pharmacy wholesalers so pharmacies won't close.
Thank you. Rick Hughes.
Madam Chair, Ranking Member, and committee members, for the record, my name is Rick Hughes. I'm a former San Juan County Council member, and for the last 21 years, I've been president and shareholder of Ray's Pharmacy on Orcas Island, the only pharmacy that is on the island. I do find some irony in the fact that I sent a letter to each of you and met with some of you trying to get LCP money for my community, which is the irony of we need more money, but we can't get it. I'm testifying in con. A lot of people have just said this. This will not pass on to the consumer. It will hit my bottom line as an independent pharmacy. I'm estimating the first year it will cost me $20,000 of incremental taxing to my store. I'd be more than willing to talk to anyone about pharmacy at any time. I've been doing this a long time. To answer the senator's question, Medicare and Medicaid in the state will not be charged, but your Washington State, Washington, and correctional facility pharmacies will be hit with the same tax. So that's where the income inequalities will hit. Double taxation is not fair to small communities. This is half of a person's job in my community. I'm the only pharmacy, one of 3 in the county. Please stop attacking our pharmacies and small businesses. All we're trying to do is support our communities and keep people safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Carrie Vanderhouen. Oh, thanks. Carrie, I think you're muted.
Sorry, I missed the second button there. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Carrie Vanderhouen. I'm a second generation pharmacist and pharmacy owner. Last week, I had to sell my pharmacy, Duval Family Drugs, after 32 years. I am here today to urge you to oppose Senate Bill 6228, which removes the tax exemption on prescription drugs at the wholesale level. While this tax is imposed on wholesalers, they have made it very clear to us through communication already that the cost will be passed directly to pharmacies through higher drug acquisition prices. PBMs will not increase their reimbursement to cover those costs. Unlike most businesses, pharmacies have zero ability to raise our prices. PBMs control what we are paid for every prescription, often at rates below our cost to purchase the drug. At the same time, all of our operating costs continue to rise: wages, benefits, supplies, utilities. We are already taxed under the B&O system at the full reimbursement amount, even when we lose money on a prescription. This tax increase may be the final blow for many independent pharmacies, especially those in rural and underserved communities. When a pharmacy closes, patients lose access to medications, vaccines, and one of the most accessible healthcare providers in their community. I respectfully ask you to vote no on SB 6228. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Excuse me. Thank you. Chris Schaffner.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Chris Schaffner. I own 2 pharmacies in Skagit County, and I have concerns and I'm testifying opposed to SB 6228. As stated, the tax rate increase will be passed on to us pharmacies, our community pharmacies, and unfortunately, as the last link in the chain and the patient-facing portion of the drug supply, we are unable to pass any of these increased costs on to our customers for either taxes like this or goods and labor in general. Because of how our contracts work with pharmacy benefit managers, they are fixed, non-negotiable contracts. We cannot simply raise our prices. Since January of 2024, we've seen over 3,000 pharmacies nationwide close, as is evidenced with the recent Rite Aid closures. This increased tax will put further pressure on dozens, if not hundreds, of pharmacies in Washington that are currently on the brink of closure. I urge you to vote no on SB 6228 as it is currently written to help preserve patient access to critical and important community pharmacy services around the state. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the public testimony and the public hearing on Senate Bill 6228. Let's move on to number 7 on the agenda, Senate Bill 6220. Alia Kennedy.
Again, Alia Kennedy, staff to the committee. Senate Bill 6220 modifies the property tax exemption for nonprofit low-income housing. For background, property owned by a nonprofit organization is generally subject to property tax. However, there are several property tax exemptions that may apply. To qualify, the property must be used exclusively for the activity for which the exemption is granted. There are limited exceptions, though. A nonprofit may lease or rent out the property without losing its property tax exemption if the lease is limited to no more than 50 days each calendar year. Any rent collected is limited to maintenance and operation costs, and any fundraising events must align with the purpose of the exemption or be conducted by a nonprofit organization. One type of property tax exemption available to nonprofits is the low-income homeownership development property tax exemption. This exemption applies to nonprofits and qualified cooperative associations that develop residences sold to low-income households. To qualify, the property must be used exclusively for this purpose. The temporary use exclusions do not apply to this particular exemption. Additionally, the exemption expires if the property is sold to another nonprofit for any use other than low-income homeownership, even if the nonprofit intends to use the property for some other tax-exempt purpose. Turning to the bill, it allows the nonprofit low-income homeownership property tax exemption to continue even when the property is sold to another nonprofit for any use that qualifies for and is granted a property tax exemption. Additionally, the temporary use exclusions do apply to the nonprofit low-income homeownership property tax exemption. This allows nonprofits to temporarily rent or lease property for certain community serving purposes without losing their property tax exemption. A fiscal note is available. The bill does not impact state revenue. It would be a shift, an indeterminate shift to non-exempt taxpayers. There are expenditure impacts of $121,000 over the 4-year for Department of Revenue administrative costs. I'm happy to answer any questions.
I don't see any questions, and we have no one signed in to testify. So, Senator Trudeau, would you like to tell us about your bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Homestead Community Land Trust will be emailing everyone to provide their position on this bill. But, you know, I brought this bill because we had a situation in my district where there was a transfer of ownership of a property. The Homestead Community Land Trust purchased the property with the intent to develop affordable housing. The last owner had allowed a performing arts group, a local group that does some really great Christmas performances, in case anyone wants to travel to the 27th to see these community performances, but they're allowing them to use the space, and allowing them to use the space even though they don't get any profit from it puts their tax exemption status at risk for the affordable housing that they want to develop. So they just want to keep this community group in, you know, performing where they can and throwing a bone to some local folks that want to see some cool performances by kids and others and not get dinged for it. So that's why I brought the bill. There's, you know, we're priced very, very narrowly, and we worked with Department of Revenue to make sure that it applies very, very narrowly to this exception. So thank you, everyone.
Okay, that concludes the public hearing on Senate Bill 6220. We'll move on to the last bill on our agenda, substitute Senate Bill 5880. Kimmy, please give us a briefing.
Good evening. For the record, Maya Aita, Staff Counsel. Before you is Senate Bill 5880 concerning toxicology testing by certified or accredited laboratories. Prosecutors use breath and blood tests to prove that a person drove under the influence or was in actual physical control of a motor vehicle while under the influence. Under current law, for results from blood and breath tests to be valid and admissible in court, the tests must be performed according to the methods approved by the state toxicologist and by an individual possessing a valid permit issued by the state toxicologist for this purpose. This bill adds another way for blood and breath test results to be valid and admissible, and that's if the analysis is conducted by a lab certified or accredited pursuant to the ISO IEC 17025 standard for forensic toxicology testing. To give some background on this standard, it was produced by two non-governmental organizations that develop international standards for various fields, the International Organization for Standardization and then the International Electrotechnical Commission. The bill explicitly permits local governments to accept donations from private non-governmental entities to facilitate the analysis of blood or breath, and the bill also imposes no duty on local governments to fund the analysis of blood or breath using laboratories other than the Washington State Patrol Toxicology Lab. I will turn things over to Kimmy for the fiscal portion.
Thank you. Members of the committee, I'm Kimmy Ides, staff to the committee. By way of fiscal impact, a fiscal note is available in your EBB. Based on estimates provided by Washington State Patrol, the agency estimates increased expenditures to the general fund in the amount of $211,000 over the 25-27 biennium and $422,000 over the 4-year outlook. They also estimate increased expenditures to the State Patrol Highway account in the amount of $79,000 over the 25-27 biennium. Expenditures are related to workload changes associated with packaging and returning stored tests to local law enforcement agencies so that they may outsource to alternative toxicology labs for processing. And with that, we're available for questions.
Are there any questions for staff? Oh, I don't see any. Thank you. Let's go to public testimony. I'm just going to run down the list here. Erica Evans, Brad Banks, Russell Brown, Captain Dion Glover, and Elizabeth Goff. Just Erica, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair Robinson and the Senate Ways and Means Committee. My name is Erica Evans, and I'm the elected Seattle City Attorney, and that I asked for your support of Senate Bill 5880, which would allow us to use private accredited laboratories for toxicology reports. This bill will save lives in each one of your districts. Right now in Seattle, if someone gets arrested for getting in an accident and is under the influence of drugs and alcohol, it's going to take 22 months before we get the toxicology report back and I can even file the case. So that means 22 months until someone could have conditions placed on them by the court, restrictions on driving. It deters and does not keep our community safe when we go for 22 months prior to being able to charge these cases due to the backlog. In 2024 alone, there were 148 drug-related traffic deaths. That means a Washingtonian dies every 2.5 days from these incidences. And speaking to the local government fiscal impact, Seattle does intend to make use of this bill. We are going to pursue city funds in the next budget to be able to pay for this, and we're committed to working with Senator Wagner and Senator Dingra on potential amendments to minimize or eliminate any costs to the state. Thank you.
Thank you. Brad?
Good afternoon, good evening, Chair Robinson, Ranking Member Gildon, members of the committee. Brad Banks here on behalf of the Association of Counties. Definitely share the problem statement that this bill is trying to address. There certainly is a significant backlog that is causing a lot of people to not get justice in the amount of time that they should be getting. I think we have two primary concerns, however, with this approach. The first being that it shifts responsibility away from what has traditionally been a state activity that has been funded at the state level to now the locals having to take on that responsibility. Secondarily, this creates somewhat of a pay-to-play justice system where if your city or county has the ability and the extra resources to pay for this type of expedited testing, good on you. If you don't, you're stuck using the normal system and the normal pathways. That doesn't feel equitable to us. We would ask that you would explore an option and maybe a temporary arrangement where a pilot could be set up where cities over 500,000 and the state toxicology lab may be able to explore using this process, see how it works, understanding that it'll be no doubt met with litigation that I'm sure Russ can talk about in a second as some of these first cases come online, being tested in a new way by defense attorneys and others. So we'd ask for your continued work on this and thinking about maybe doing this in a little bit of a different way. Appreciate it.
Go ahead.
Good evening, Chair Robinson, members of the committee. I'm Russell Brown, the Executive Director for the Washington Association of Prosecuting Attorneys, here testifying to other strong, huge appreciation for Senator Wagner listening to some of our concerns and adopting that in the Law and Justice Committee, making those modifications. We do like the idea that this would give the Tox Lab the ability to send some of these tests either out of state or to a different lab. We would love to see kind of this and something where the Tox Lab has some flexibility to, on its own, start to send these out to start decreasing our backlog. And as Mr. Banks said, it's difficult to put this on the backs of counties and cities, many counties which are facing significant reduction. Litigation piece, this is a highly litigated area of the law, DUI. There's just tremendous amount of litigation. So if there's a way to limit the number of people who introduce it, as well as limit the number of people who are sending requests to the Tox Lab, I think that would ultimately reduce costs. Thank you.
Senator Wagner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Brad, to your point about it being inequitable, do you think that the fact that a city like Seattle who wants to do this and invests in it, that will take the strain off the state lab and in effect help the cities who can't afford to do it because their test kits would come to the front of the line in a sooner way? So does that kind of meet the equitability test in your mind?
It's a good question, Senator. And again, I think we're all trying to say we agree that there's this problem, and how do we get this backlog out of reduced? And I think we would argue the city of Seattle certainly has a large number of those cases. I think they're like 900, something like that. So yeah, I do think there's progress that could be made here. I think the problem that we would see is I don't know that you would see the backlog reduction in the type of quick fix thing that you think might be happening by just allowing this to happen. I mean, it would take a long time, I think, even for the city to set up this process. And then, like as I said, I think there could be a lot of litigation that results from folks saying, hey, this is now not being tested in a state lab, it's being a private lab. What does that mean? We'd like to challenge that in court, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't know that this is a long-term or a short-term fix necessary to a long-term problem. I would say we don't oppose the city of Seattle, if they have extra resources to do this, having that authority.
And may I quickly just add, we do just have under 1,000 cases, and that would free up space for other jurisdictions that are in the queue right now with a backlog.
Okay, thank you all for your testimony. I see there's someone waiting to come up behind you. Go ahead whenever you're ready.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, Catherine Dion-Gleber, the Washington State Patrol Legislative Director. I brought with me our commander of our toxicology lab.
Hi, Liz Goff.
And we signed in today to answer some questions about our fiscal note here. And I just want to really take a second to talk about, we're looking to be good partners. We're trying to find any way to help with the backlog. Her and her staff work really, really hard. There's only 16 people that currently do this work for the 19,000 cases that come in on an annual basis with a large increase, and they have a large backlog. So we're looking for any way. So we hear the concerns. We're here to answer those questions and see how we can work. We've been working with the city of Seattle and working with, try to find different ways. We think we might have some opportunities here to talk about and how we can help that.
Thank you. I'm just here for questions that there may be.
Well, I'm curious if you can respond in any way to the assertion that was made that this will lead to a lot of litigation. Have other states used this method, and have we seen that litigation happen? Has it already been litigated other places that it wouldn't need to be litigated here?
Sure, there's been recent case law in both the federal Supreme Court as well as the state Supreme Court related to expert testimony for forensic testing. And so there are some challenges with having multiple folks who performed testing or forensic analysis on a single case, increasing the number of witnesses needed for any given case. So that would be one of the concerns with both the in-house testing, utilizing multiple individuals for expert testimony, and then also for outsourcing. We would just need to ensure that those witnesses would be available should it go to the criminal justice system.
Senator Dingrove.
Thank you, Chair Robinson. You know, we did this with sexual assault forensic kits, so this is not something the state has not done before. And the chain of custody, as long as it's still packaged in the format that the officer sent to the lab, you're simply forwarding that, and then you're out of the chain of custody because you haven't opened or tampered with that evidence. And so all of the testimony goes to the experts that are paid for by city dollars. So I'll tell you, I'm really struggling with the fiscal note here, because there are easy ways of doing chain of custody where you don't have to do a lot of work other than forward the test onto the other lab, just like we did for the sexual assault kits.
Yes, so for the fiscal note specifically, what we're looking at would be the repackaging of evidence that had already been submitted to the lab and is currently in the testing queue. So that would need to come back out of the testing queue, repackaged, re-verified, and then transitioned back to the local jurisdiction. We think there is a fiscal cost associated with the time and resources to do that, and that would either need to be done by current employees in an overtime capacity or with new staffing. Our concern is if we don't have additional staffing to take on these bulk evidence transactions or transfers, that we're going to need to take resources from the laboratory in evidence accessioning or bringing in new evidence or doing evidence transactions needed for the testing within the own laboratory. So yes, there are some similar things to the sexual assault kit that were successful. Some of the case law that I was referring to earlier are newer case laws, Smith v. Arizona, which is a federal case that came out in 2024, as well as State v. Hall-Hott, which came out this past year in 2025. So there are some different challenges with that, as well as the number of experts that would be testing individual toxicology work compared to DNA work in a different discipline.
Senator, we have spoken with the city of Seattle, and also we think we have a potential amendment adjusted that could lower our fiscal note to zero, depending on post stuff that's already in backlog versus what's starting now. If we set the amendment now, it says that anything from coming in, they'll never touches our hands. That's a zero fiscal note for us, and we totally agree with that, and we could, if that can help lower our backlog and let our team catch up a little bit, we're all for that. Or there's other options we have. She just mentioned overtime, so maybe we can go into a contract with the cities independently, and they can pay us on what they need specifically. That's another opportunity for us to lower. So we have some opportunities that we're trying to be the good partner to realize. We had to look at this as, we don't know. There's 16,000 cases backlog, and there's about 12,000 of them that are not WSP or the city of Seattle necessarily. But if those all come calling and say we want them all back tomorrow, how do we get this done? So that's where the number came from. It was more of a, we don't know at this time. It could be 50 cases, but it could be 1,000 cases for all we know.
That's helpful. Just for context and understanding. Any other questions? Thank you very much for coming and providing the information. And I don't see any other questions, so that ends the public hearing on Substitute Senate Bill 5880 and ends our meeting for this evening.